Hello and welcome to another Aston Original show from Aston History. I am Brian Sudlow, lecturer in history. We are talking today about a very historic pen. Pens are crucial symbols from a historical perspective. It's often been said that the pen is mightier than the sword. Pens, or their predecessors, quills, have signed so many documents down the ages, from laws and peace treaties to confessions and death warrants. In truth, the pen and the sword rule the world between them, in the hands of those who rule the world by words and those who rule it by conflict. There are also those, of course, who cause conflict by words, but let's leave those for another time. I'm joined on the show today by Professor Helen Higson, who is Professor of Higher Education, Learning and Management at Aston Business School. Helen, very welcome.
Good to be here.
Well, look, thanks very much for joining us, and let's step back straight away just to June, 26th of June, I think it was, in the summer, when the pen, the Queen's pen, indeed, was unveiled. Tell us, please, a little bit about the event and indeed about the pen itself.
Well, the thing here is, let's look at the picture. We have here not the King, but we have the King's representative, the Lord Lieutenant of the West Midlands, who's here to unveil the pen for the monarchy. So again, there's a bit of symbolism. It's coming round in one circle. And then we have the Vice-Chancellor, and similarly, as we're going to say a bit later, when the Queen came and used this pen, you also see the Vice-Chancellor there. And then there's me as the curator of the pen, as again will become apparent.
Very good. So the pen, let's be more precise, was used at the opening of the buildings, our main buildings, now the buildings of Aston University, but then the buildings of the College of Technology. This is all the way back in 1955, isn't it?
Yes, and this is, in one way, not a special pen, but in other ways, a very special pen. And there may be many people watching or listening to this who have seen a Parker 51. Parker 51 was the pen, and it was a pen that represented what the nation was like at that time. It was a beautifully manufactured, beautifully streamlined pen using the best quality materials, and it was there to revolutionize how we wrote. And in fact, I have a Parker 51 that my mother was given. So I have actually used a Parker 51 quite a bit, and it is beautiful to write with. And so it would be an absolute choice for it to be used when your monarch comes to grace the presence of the institution and to open formally our beautiful, what was then a new building.
Indeed. So so the Queen came along and she opened the buildings. This was a really significant moment, wasn't it, for the site, for the development of the site of what became Aston University itself.
Yes, it certainly was. And if you think about it, that our building was very much a 50s building, but it had been designed in the 30s. It had been designed as a marker of commerce and engineering and education within the city, and within a city that was very much about these things. It's a big engineering city, a big commercial city. And here, this was about creating continuing to create the employees that were needed with the skills that were needed to move forward the industry and commerce of the UK. And you have to remember that the university, this was in 1955 she was visiting, so 10 years after the war. It was a regeneration of peacetime industry. And so very symbolic that the pen, which was also a metaphor, a symbol of that, was being used.
Of manufacturing. It's extraordinary, actually, isn't it, how the lines of continuity run back to the interwar years, the period in which Britain is trying to rebuild after pick itself up, if you like, after the First World War. Not so much rebuild, but certainly pick itself up after the First World War. There's all the problems, of course, of the Depression as well during that period. But then the college had been there before. It was the Birmingham Municipal Technical School, which itself was founded precisely to try to give British industry the skills that were needed for the Second Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
So there's this line of continuity that runs through, and that it always becomes the manufacturing and so on always becomes crucial at these turning points. And as you say, the post-war world is again another turning point, another period of change. And of course, we see the Queen here. We see Prince Philip, of course. There's also the community as well, isn't there, in these pictures?
Yes, we've got the Lord Mayor and the Lady Mayoress. We've got the judges represented there, and we've got a number of other distinguished guests. It was a really, really important event. And it was an important event, not just because the Queen came to Aston, because of how she combined it with the rest of the event that she came to. I don't know whether it's worth showing that picture as well.
I think we've got an account of the day, haven't we, in newspapers and the Court Circular. So
she came to Aston, but she also went to Bourneville, to the factory there. She went to King Edward's School, and she went to Lucas. And in this, I think again, it's a symbolic gesture. This was a well-designed visit. This wasn't just the Queen turning up. So she was going to show that manufacturing was important, that Birmingham was important, that education and skills was important at this time, and it was a very high-level, important visit. Interestingly, I noticed that she'd been to Stoke to visit the potteries at the same time, indeed. Again for manufacturing. And we also see in the Birmingham Post what was going on in the world at the time. So it was really important that that we see something about Cold War. We see Syria and Israel there, but we also see the fact that this is her first visit since the coronation. And she chose to do those things which are not. It's not visiting a hospital. It's not going to around a community area. It's going to education, and it's going to manufacturing. And I think that was really purposeful.
It's interesting, just to dwell for a second on the experience of the Queen's visit. Nowadays, we're so used to the instant reproduction of images and footage for such events. But of course, we're in the middle of the 1950s. Only a tiny number of people have got televisions. The coronation was televised, but people watching that it was often a communal event because there'd only be maybe one or two tellies in a street. And likewise here, I mean, the pictures are suggestive of this. It's still this drab, colourless post-war world. Rationing has finished not so long ago, and this is a real splash of colour, a real splash of festivity and celebration, isn't it? In a grey and in some ways difficult time. Incidentally, I was talking to the Lord Lieutenant Sir John Crabtree on the day of the inauguration of the pen display, and he told me that he remembers going to some event as a little boy, standing on a street and waving a flag.
Oh, right.
But he couldn't remember exactly what it was. And I said, well, I think it's probably the Queen.
And it says there the 10,000 converge on Victoria Square. And actually also in our archives at Aston, we do have some pictures of when Queen Victoria came to Aston Street and came down. And maybe that's another show, another time.
That's another show, absolutely. So that was the great event, 1955. 1956, the following year, the College of Technology becomes the College of Advanced Technology. And then only 10 years later, we receive the Royal Charter and we become Aston University. But the question that I have, I'm sure some of the listeners will have, is what happened to the pen?
Well, there's a big gap in our institution's history. We have no idea what happened to it between that time and when it turned up on my desk in around 2020. I have no idea where it was.
For 45 years.
Yes, we have no idea. And it's actually, so what happened was we were looking at reviving our archives. We were starting a campaign to get them all together. And I sent out a call to everyone across the university. Have you got everything? Have you got anything? Have you got anything interesting from our history? And a lot of interesting things arrived. But the most exciting to me was the pen. This pen arrived. And as you see it here, it was in a sleeve, a cardboard sleeve, and on the sleeve it said, "This is the pen that the Queen used when she came here on this date in 1955." And this was incredibly exciting to me because, as I've said, I own a Parker 51, so I knew what it was, but also because I am a user of fountain pens every day. And that's why I have a lot of ink on my fingers. And so this as a historian, holding this pen as a symbol of history, but also as something that could be used. And I have to say, I have used this pen. Oh. I have signed my name a few times. But from that day, we were absolutely adamant that we needed to do something with it. I talked to the Vice Chancellor about it, and he said, well, perhaps I could use it when I'm signing important memoranda of cooperation with important partners. And we thought about that. And then we thought, well, actually, it's still going to go into a drawer in between. It was better to actually celebrate it because it needed to be shared with the community. Yeah. And that's what we were doing at that event in June this year. Yeah.
That's a fascinating story, but this is very redolent of many things in history. Things can, as it were, become forgotten, but then resurface. And when they resurface, of course, it's a moment for us to reconnect with the past. And it strikes me as really significant that there are things about this pen, as old as it is, which absolutely connect with Aston's present and Aston's future.
Oh, definitely. And I think that this was very much brought out in our celebration, that there was the history of the pen, there was the history of pens and the Parker pen and what they represented. And we have here a picture of the audience as well. So the audience was made up of people who were members of the university, but also some of our key partners, members from Birmingham City Council who were interested in its archival relationship with some of the archives they have, people from the Pen Museum. We also have here the High Sheriff, who we hadn't expected to grace his presence here. And so we have both the Lord Lieutenant and the High Sheriff, who I think were both people in those roles when the Queen arrived. So I think it's the pen is about our relationship with the locality. It's our relationship with the employers of Birmingham. It's the fact that we are a great partner, that we realise our position in the locality and in Birmingham, and that we still want to work with these partners to develop the next generation of skilled graduates who can go out and make a difference socially and economically. And it was a very jolly, pleasant event, but it also had that gravitas, which I think is quite important in that thread from our history to the future.
This is, I think this is one of the things about history, isn't it? That it, in some ways it tells us who we are. In some ways it helps us to remain who we are as well, giving us a sense of identity. I think the curator of the Museum of Science and Industry was also there on that evening. Yes. Again, it's another great repository of Birmingham's past and so on. So it seems like all these threads converge, both from the past, but then also pointing towards the future. Because I think we are planning other events, aren't we? Along these lines. Would you like to sort of tell us a little bit about that?
So in November last year, we launched our Aston 2030 strategy, and in a way, part of that strategy is using our history. And so there are other items in our growing archives which are now being catalogued and cleaned in some cases that we want to showcase. So we intend to have an event later in the year where we'll actually talk about when we became this institution, the College of Advanced Technology, and also some of the other events along the way. So we've discovered, for example, some of the original syllabuses for some of the courses that we ran originally. We found some furniture and some equipment that was used early on. And when we look at the equipment that we're using now and that we can look for in the future. So, and particularly as we come up to the next anniversary of 1966, that will be really important. So we are intending to open up our archives much more, to hold more events like this, and also to publish a book. The Vice-Chancellor has commissioned us to write a book of these symbols and images.
Wonderful. Helen, thank you ever so much for joining me on this Aston Originals show. So do keep your eyes peeled for future events connected to our archives, connected to the history of Aston University. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again very soon.